Hello and welcome back to another episode of Notion Bonsai, and today we're going to be doing a little update and some summer pruning on my Japanese larch bonsai forest. This is the forest. As you can see, it has put on so much growth since we pruned it last year. So this will be the third video on this planting and the second video of doing a summer prune. I just let this forest get really strong the whole way through spring. I didn't want to prune it at this time. I just wanted to let it send out as many shoots as it wanted. And then that way, whenever we come to actually prune it today, we've got so many options. There's so many branches all over. All these branches that I wanted to thicken further in, I've just let grow long like this one. I can tell just by looking at this and the color of the foliage that this is really healthy. It's on the what is known as energy positive side, and I always like to assess before you go and prune a planting or a bonsai. First, just do a little check to see, is the tree strong enough to handle it? And in this case, it's super healthy, we can prune. But if not, if you see the foliage is yellowing or it isn't pushing out as much growth as you would like, sometimes it's okay just to skip a year of pruning and then come back and do it again the next year. And now before we begin, the tools that we'll be using in this video today are some twig cutters, branch cutters, wire cutters, some bonsai tweezers, a bent fork, and some gin pliers. And as always, by no means do you need all of these sort of specialized bonsai tools. If you're a complete beginner and you want to get started, you can get by with just a cheap pair of garden scissors or some secateurs. You know, instead of the bonsai gin pliers, you could just use a normal pair of hardware pliers. Whatever tools that you have at your disposal to get a particular job done. You just want to ensure that whatever tools that you are using are clean and sharp. Clean so we don't introduce any bacterial or fungal infections between our trees, and sharp because in horticulture a nice sharp blade will give you a much cleaner cut, and clean cuts heal so much faster and more efficiently than a blunt cut that was squashed by a dull blade. So I'm going to start by just simply taking off all of these fertilizer pellets. I can put these back on later, and you can see already the top layer of the surface of this forest has started to grow weeds, and if we don't stay on top of this now, this is just going to keep getting worse and worse. So if there's a lot like this, what I like to do is just take the bent fork and just gently rake the weeds off the top of the soil and go in with your hand and just pull them out. Now that I've finished cleaning up the weeds on the surface level of the soil, now I'm going to begin pruning. And much like I pruned in the last video, I want to try and push all of this growth back. Any of these parts that are starting to get a little bit too leggy, I'm just going to cut back. So as you can see here, this one is really long. I'm going to cut this back to here for now, just keeping this nice and compact. With the Japanese larch as a species, they do grow apically dominant, meaning they put most of their energy and growth on the apexes in order to ensure that the bottom branches remain nice and strong and healthy. It's good practice to prune more heavily on the top than you do the bottom, just to balance that vigor. Usually when we work on trees, you would work from the bottom up. But with larches, I actually like to start on the top. And when I prune these branches, I simply want to prune them back to the first one or two sets of buds on the branch. So I'll be cutting this one right back down to here. There's a bud right here that's going to take over as the leader. Again, I'm just going to cut this back really heavily here. This one can be pruned back to here. So as you can see here, well actually as you can't see because there's so much foliage, this is actually the apex of one of the trees. I pull all of this back, you can see it right there. And this branch is already a little bit weak. This must have been knocked or something. See here? So that really, all of that needs to go, because that's just gonna hinder the tree. Unfortunately, that needs to go, but it was quite weak at this joint. All this growth, I'm just going to prune back. Just gonna prune this back to here. There's a little branch coming from under here at the elbow, and I don't want any of this crotch growth, so I'm gonna, if I zoom out, you can actually see there's also another apex here that's quite congested, so I'm just gonna reduce that back a little. There's a lot going on here, so I'm gonna take away this one that's growing downward. This branch is crossing over everything, so I'm just gonna remove that. I'm also going to remove all of this because this isn't the leader of the tree, the one beside it is. So I can actually just come in with the branch cutters and just clean this area up nice and flush. I've I've now pruned all the apexes of the Japanese larch, and now you don't have to do it this way. If you wish to, you could also just work from the bottom up, the normal standard way of pruning. But I just personally like to know that once I've dealt with the top of the trees, I then like to see what's left that I have to work with. So all that I have done with the apexes is simply remove any extra shoots that's on the top and reduce it back to as few shoots that I possibly can. So by doing this and reducing it back to just 1 or 2 buds in the next growing season or the year after, these buds will push out into new branches. They'll probably grow quite long. Then we'll come in again, do the same thing to them branches. And then as you can see, from one year to the other, we can get a more dense and ramified structure. And this is what's called ramification. And with that same pruning technique, I'm going to prune all the other trees in this planting in the same way, especially with the side branches, just pushing all that growth back so we can just take the forest a little step further and being a little bit more dense and ramified looking. I've got a black plastic bag. I'm going to cover all the other trees except for this one that I'm going to start working on. This allows us to see more of the structure of the tree. All of these branches are really long. I'm just going to shorten these back into all the little buds that's growing back here, and we're really just cutting this right back. And all of this growth wasn't in vain. This growth here was to help thicken this little sharp piece close to the trunk. I'm going to shorten that back to there. This part at the front we're going to take quite a lot off. I'm even going to shorten this side branch to keep it even more compact. And then if I take this bag off, you can see how much we actually reduced in just this little tree. And I'm simply going to apply just that same pruning technique that I did to this little tree on the side to all the other trees. Now looking at this thick branch here, usually in bonsai, the thicker branches be at the base of the tree, and then as you come more and more towards the apex, they get thinner and more delicate. And in this case, I just feel this one's a little bit heavy for the top of this tree. It's looking a little bit out of balance. So what I'm going to do is just take off all of the foliage, and we're going to create what is known as a jin. And all a jin is we take off the bark of the branch and leave the wood exposed, and this adds a little bit more age and character to a tree. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to take the knife and just cut around the base of the branch, and that way whenever we strip the bark off, it isn't going to peel down the tree. You can just take the jin pliers and crush the bark off the branch the whole way to the end, and it should peel off pretty easily, just like this. And now what I'm thinking in this area is also, I may actually want to create a shari, just a little one, so this branch doesn't look too out of place. It's looking a little bit long here, so I'm just going to cut it at an angle, like this, and then take the jin pliers and just peel it back. And that gives us this lovely sense of age with the inner wood exposed. And then just to continue this down the tree, I'm taking the knife, and I'm really going to carefully do this. We're going to just push the knife into the trunk like this. And I'm just going to do a really small shari. And a shari is just wherever we expose a little piece of the trunk. I'm going to come around this way like this. Very, very carefully. I want a nice point at the end. And then we should be able to just peel this off. I haven't quite got into the wood yet, so I'm going to go and dig this in and just peel it down. The bark on larches is quite thick. I'm pretty happy with that. And now as you can see, we have removed quite a lot of foliage from this tree. Look at all of this, and there's more over here. And I have full confidence that this forest will recover quite happily from what we've did today. I was going to repot this year. As you can see, there is just a lot of roots coming out under here. But after looking at it, I think I can give this another year in this pot, and then we can come back next year and deal with the roots. And now as a bonus part of this video, I'm going to show you how to take cuttings from Japanese larch. Just like most trees, you can take what's known as a heel cutting or a nodal cutting. A heel cutting is whenever you take a branch and you pull a smaller branch off of it. The little end that we have here is what's known as the heel. From here, all you have to do is strip off the lower foliage. You want the cutting planted half the depth as the cutting is long. You can dip this into some hormone rooting gel or powder, then stick it into soil and it should root. And then it is pretty much the same thing with the nodal cuttings. I'm just going to cut off the lower half of foliage from this branch. Then I'm also going to cut off the end just about here. I'm going to dip this into some hormone rooting gel, and then with a chopstick I'm just going to make a little pilot hole for this to go into. That way whenever we put it in, the gel doesn't rub off. You just push it in and then secure it in place. Put it in here. And to ensure that these really survive and take root, you want to place them in a nice warm, humid environment, almost like a greenhouse. And if you don't have a greenhouse where you are, if your garden's too small or for whatever reason, you can do this little trick with just a Ziploc bag. You take the entire planting and put it into the bag. Make sure it's nice and straight. Do a little mist of water, and then we can just seal off the bag. You just want to ensure that you air this out every couple of days. That way you don't get any fungal problems inside. And there you have it. That was just a little update on my bonsai forest. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like on it. It really helps out the channel a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And let me know down in the comments what you think of this forest so far and my styling on it today. And even if you had done something differently, I'm always open to new and different ideas in bonsai. If you would like to support me in the things that I do on this channel, hit the thanks button down below. Or if you'd like to become a channel member, hit the join button. That way you will get early access to new videos before they go out to everyone else, and you will get access to membership posts. But on that, thank you so very much for watching.